My name is Bill, and I'm 55 years old, a pilot flying out of Denver. I've spent more than half my life up in the sky, a good part of it watching the sun paint the clouds in hues of orange and purple as I make my way across the country. It's a beautiful job, really, seeing the world from a vantage point few ever do, but it's also a demanding one. My days often start before the roosters even think about crowing, the smell of jet fuel and stale coffee a constant companion. Lately, the early mornings and late nights have started to weigh a little heavier on my bones, and the quiet hum of the engines, once a comforting lullaby, sometimes just feels like a lonely drone. I've always been proud of what I do, proud to wear this uniform, to be the one responsible for getting hundreds of people safely to their destinations. But lately, a different kind of weight has been pressing down on me, not the G-forces of takeoff, but the invisible kind that settles deep in your chest. My daughter, Sarah, a wonderful young woman, recently went through a tough divorce. She's got a little boy, my grandson Ethan, who's just 6 years old and the light of my life. Sarah's trying so hard to make it on her own, working 2 jobs, but Denver isn't an easy place to get by, and the bills just seem to pile up faster than she can earn. I send what I can, trying to be the steady rock she needs, but I'm not as young as I used to be, and my own retirement fund isn't exactly overflowing. Every extra flight I take, every hour I push myself is for them, but it never feels like enough. This feeling, this gnawing doubt that I'm not doing enough, that I'm failing to protect my family, has become my internal nemesis. It whispers to me during long flights, during sleepless nights in hotel rooms in cities far from home, telling me I'm just an old pilot, a relic, unable to truly make a difference anymore. I see the younger pilots, full of fire and ambition, and sometimes I wonder if my time is running out, if I'm just taking up space. I worry about what will happen to Sarah and Ethan when I can't fly anymore, if I'll ever be able to give them the solid ground they deserve. I've tried everything to make things better. I volunteered for all the red-eye flights, the holiday routes, the ones nobody else wanted. That meant more time away from home, more missed calls with Sarah, more tired goodbyes with my grandkid over video chat. I skipped meals in airports, packed my own sandwiches, anything to save a few extra dollars to send to Sarah. I even started picking up some odd jobs on my days off, fixing things for neighbors, anything to supplement my income, but it felt like I was just treading water in a rapidly rising tide. Each time I thought I was getting a little ahead, something would inevitably happen to set me back. My old car, a faithful companion for years, decided it needed a new transmission, a repair that swallowed up months of extra savings in an instant. Then there was the boiler at my small house that gave out in the middle of a Denver winter, another unexpected expense that felt like a punch to the gut. The airline industry itself seemed to be against me sometimes, too. A string of severe weather delays and mechanical issues meant canceled flights, which meant fewer hours in the air and less pay. I remember one particularly brutal week. I was stuck on standby for 3 days straight, missing out on a chunk of earnings I had earmarked for Ethan's school supplies. I felt like a stranger in my own life, always chasing, always falling short. My conversations with Sarah became strained. She knew I was working myself ragged, and she felt guilty, which made me feel even worse. I wanted to tell her it was okay, that I loved doing it for them, but the exhaustion was seeping into my voice, making my reassurances sound hollow even to my own ears. I started feeling more isolated than ever, surrounded by thousands of people every day, but truly connected to no one. My lowest point came after a particularly grueling string of international flights, crossing time zones until my internal clock was completely broken. I had just found out that Sarah's part-time job at the local diner was cutting her hours even further, making her situation even more desperate. I had managed to save up a decent sum from all those extra flights, enough to cover her rent for a couple of months, enough to breathe. I was so proud, so relieved. Then, just as I was about to transfer the money, I got a call. My own mother, who lived out of state, had a sudden medical emergency, nothing life-threatening but requiring immediate care and, of course, a significant financial outlay. Just like that, the savings I had scraped together, the hope I had built, vanished in an instant, redirected to another urgent need. I sat in my small apartment in Denver, the city lights twinkling outside my window like uncaring stars, and I just stared. My shoulders slumped, the weight in my chest felt crushing, and I felt utterly defeated. I was 55, a veteran pilot, and I couldn't even keep my own family afloat. The internal nemesis roared in my head, telling me I was useless, that my efforts were pointless, that I should just give up. What was the point of all this hard work, all this sacrifice, if I couldn't even protect the people I loved most? I truly felt like throwing in the towel, walking away from it all, just letting the current take me wherever it wanted. It was late, nearing midnight, and a thick, unexpected snowstorm had just slammed into Denver, grounding almost every flight. My own flight, a cross-country red-eye, had been canceled hours ago, and all I wanted was to go home, to crawl into bed and forget the day. My head was throbbing, my eyes felt gritty from exhaustion, and my spirit was bone-weary. As I walked slowly through the deserted terminal, my flight bag heavy on my shoulder, I heard a small, muffled sob coming from a corner near a closed gate. My first instinct, driven by pure exhaustion and the desire to just disappear, was to keep walking. But something, a flicker of something, maybe a faint echo of my own grandson, made me pause. I saw a small figure huddled in a chair, a young boy, maybe 7 or 8 years old, with his head buried in his knees. He was an unaccompanied minor, his small backpack beside him, and he was clearly terrified. A ground staff member, looking equally stressed and tired, was trying to explain something to him, but the boy just shook his head, tears streaming down his face. His flight had been canceled due to the storm, and with the blizzard showing no signs of letting up, all the hotels were full, and no connecting flights would be leaving until morning, if then. His parents, who were supposed to meet him at his destination, were unreachable in the chaos. The ground staff, with a terminal full of angry, stranded passengers to deal with, looked overwhelmed. They were doing their best, but one person couldn't be everywhere at once. I watched the boy for a moment, seeing not just a passenger, but a scared child, utterly alone in a sea of strangers and uncertainty. It was Ethan's age. The internal nemesis whispered again, "Just go, Bill. You've got your own problems, you're exhausted, you've done enough." But another voice, clearer this time, stronger, spoke back. It was the voice of a man who still believed in doing the right thing, even when it hurt. I walked over my uniform, making the ground staff member look up with a flicker of hope. "Everything okay here?" I asked, my voice softer than I thought I could manage. The boy looked up, his eyes red and puffy, full of fear. "My mom," he whispered. "She's not here, I don't know anyone." I knelt down so I was at his eye level. "Hey there, buddy," I said gently. "My name is Captain Bill. I'm a pilot just like the one who was supposed to fly you." I pulled out my identification, showing him my pilot's license, watching his eyes widen slightly. "Looks like this storm has decided to keep us all here for the night. But you know what? We pilots, we stick together. I'm not going anywhere, and neither are you, not alone." The ground staff member looked relieved, grateful. She confirmed she just needed someone to oversee him, to make sure he was safe, as she had to attend to other pressing issues. This was my leap of faith. I knew I wouldn't get paid for this, knew it would delay my own desperately needed rest, but I couldn't leave him. I sat with that little boy for hours through the long, snowy night. I shared my last sandwich with him, the one I had packed from home. I told him stories about flying, about how the stars look like diamonds from above, about brave pilots and wondrous adventures. I explained how airplanes work, how even when things seem scary, there are always people working to make sure everything is safe. He eventually leaned his head against my arm, worn out from crying, and fell asleep, trusting me completely. Holding that child, feeling his small, vulnerable weight, something shifted inside me. It wasn't about the money, it wasn't about my problems. It was about simply being there for another human being. It was about connection, about kindness. That night I wasn't just Captain Bill, the weary pilot. I was Bill, the protector, the storyteller, the human being who chose not to walk away. The next morning the storm cleared and the boy's parents arrived, frantic with worry but overflowing with gratitude when they saw him safe with me. They thanked me repeatedly, their eyes shining with tears, and the boy even gave me a shy hug goodbye. I finally made it home, utterly exhausted, but something inside me felt lighter, renewed. That night in the airport, sitting with that scared child, had reminded me of what truly mattered. My problems hadn't disappeared, Sarah's situation was still challenging, and my bank account hadn't magically refilled. But my perspective had changed. The internal nemesis of doubt and despair that had been gnawing at me for so long had been silenced, replaced by a quiet strength, a renewed sense of purpose. I realized that my value wasn't just in the paycheck I earned, but in the connections I made, the kindness I could offer, the difference I could make, even in the smallest ways. That experience reignited something in my soul. I started paying more attention to the people around me, really seeing them. I began taking a few extra moments with nervous passengers, offering a reassuring word to weary flight attendants, sharing a smile with the ground crew. I discovered a new joy in mentoring younger pilots, sharing not just technical skills, but wisdom about resilience and the importance of empathy. I also found new ways to connect with Sarah and Ethan. Instead of just sending money, I started spending more quality time with them when I was home, reading to Ethan, helping Sarah with chores, simply being present. We started building a stronger bond based on love and support, not just financial dependence. And then a few months later, something truly unexpected happened. I received a letter from a lawyer informing me that a distant relative I barely knew had passed away and surprisingly left me a small, modest inheritance. It wasn't a fortune, but it was enough to cover my mother's remaining medical bills and, more importantly, to give Sarah the buffer she needed to finally get on her feet, to find a better-paying job and move into a safer neighborhood for Ethan. It was exactly what we needed, a true gift from the universe. It wasn't a direct reward for that night in the airport, but it felt like a ripple effect, a quiet confirmation that when you put kindness out into the world, goodness somehow finds its way back to you. I still fly, and the skies are still beautiful, but now every time I look out at the vast expanse below, I don't feel quite so alone. I know that even in the biggest, most impersonal systems, a single act of kindness can create a connection, a lifeline, and remind us all that we are never truly adrift.